we don't need to pull that up.
We do.
We can just focus on like the YouTube channel or Instagram.
Boredom Bomb. Let's do that.
One thing I got to figure out is I don't want Boredom Bomb to actually be my brand.
Why do you say that?
Unless somebody hears the whole entire story behind why those words and that logo make sense in the genre that I'm in.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. Like just a normal person,
right?
If they saw a shirt that said Boredom Bomb and they see the outdoors with a bomb, it's like, well, does this person hate trees? You know what I mean?
just think of like you're blowing up boring. You're taking
right.
boring and you're just
so that's kind
it.
of the idea behind it. But the thing is everybody else going to grasp that easily enough? And I don't think so. So that's why I don't think it's a very good brand.
Okay. So we're looking at Boredom Bomb then. And we've got this Life Shouldn't Be Boring. Tips, tricks, and stories from the outdoors to help you get outdoors.
Right.
And then we have loading. But that's just because I'm working off cell phone and working remotely.
We're also on my farm that has terrible internet access, which is a trial of my life, actually.
Yeah. It looks pretty good. Are these your pictures on here?
Yep. Everything on there is my pictures. The mountains are from New Zealand. And in the true style of an amateur photographer that's not that great at taking photos yet, they're all very, very over-edited.
Yeah, I feel that way. But the picture that you released not yesterday, of the trucks, and you're like too much tundras.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good editing.
I think there's this fine line between editing photos where you're going for a very stylistic look, and stylistic means it's not supposed to look like a natural photo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's these people that make these really stylized photos and you look at them and you just go, wow, that's fire. That's amazing. And then there's like these amateur photographers that can't take a good photo and we do a bunch of editing to it.
Yeah, and
you're like, look, what I'm going for here is to pass as stylistic when in all reality, I'm just trying to hide the fact that my exposure was completely wrong.
Right.
And
so where were you with that one? Because
right there.
Okay.
We're right there. We're trying to fix a photo that was underexposed and overexposed at the same time.
Do you want to talk about what you're stepping into now and the direction you're heading and why you bought your new truck? Or would you like to talk about what you put or what's on your new truck?
We could talk about why I bought it because I'm still going through it right now. So honest to God, I know a lot of what's on it, but I still don't know everything that's on it.
Yeah. Well, there's 18-inch shocks on the rear, triple bypass.
So the triple bypass Foxes in the rear and in the front.
That's a lot of travel.
Yeah, it's a long travel system, but it's not undersprung. So that ends up limiting your travel, actually. It's got a bigger shock than it can actually handle right now. I mean, this kind of goes to your question on where we're going. Why did we even get that truck?
Yeah.
Because I had a perfectly good Tundra for overlanding.
Yeah. The gray one.
Yeah, the gray one that everyone knows. With the stripes that everybody wants to know where they're from, which I can do a quick plug for Taco Vinyl. It's
not allowed. Go ahead.
Two brothers, dude. I love it. It's two brothers that started making vinyl products and now have managed to turn it into a whole business. But yeah, so that truck was a good overland truck. It's actually a good just general overland build because the reality of overlanding is mostly you drive on pavement and then you do some trails.
Yeah.
And that's what that was built for. The white truck is long travel, and it's because of an interest in the desert in Baja. So we took the gray truck down to Baja. But the more and more you do in the desert and the more and more you do on rough trails in the desert, the more you want to be able to go really, really fast on really rough terrain.
Yeah.
And that's where wanting to move to long travel. I don't advise this. This is breaking, there's like the cardinal rules of overland, and I'm breaking those rules, and I know that. And having a channel that advises people on like beginners that are just getting into overland I'm almost like a living contradiction right now, because on one level, mostly I'm telling people like, here's how to get into overland as cheap as possible, because we have all these people putting off living and building trucks that never go anywhere. because they're going to go someplace when their build is done.
Yeah.
It's just like, forget that.
That's probably
most
like
important
30%.
mod is gas. Just go, right?
Yeah.
So trying to get people to go, I think, is the biggest thing, and drive their vehicle, because nobody realizes, not nobody, but a lot of people that are getting into overlanding right now, they don't understand how capable stock vehicles are.
Right.
Because I have my gray truck literally just has a kit on it, a suspension kit lift.
Yeah.
And I can go run all the famous trails in Moab. Not
I mean, you have sliders, right? And you have
rock sliders.
You have
but
underbody protection.
I don't have skid plates.
Nothing.
All I have is the rock sliders.
Okay.
But the thing is, that's kind of, in some ways, that's my point for beginners, is you need to learn your vehicle. So Tundra's got a long body and all I have is rock sliders. Well, what you learn on that is if you have a shelf that's too big to get up and down, you have to take it at a slight angle. You take it at a slight angle, you land on a slider.
Right.
If I took it straight, I would need to be landing on my skids, but I don't have skids.
Exactly.
So I take it at an angle and I slide down. I have a video actually that's perfect example of this in Moab, where I literally took a step that was way too big for me to drop down at an angle. Yeah. So my slide on my passenger side caught and my wheel was completely off the ground. And it just, you see the whole entire truck just slide down the whole entire thing, 100% of the way to the vehicle on one of my rock sliders.
Right.
It was totally smooth, didn't break anything.
How did you know that slider was good enough to withstand the weight of your truck? Because I think that's a big point here, is that like there's a lot of rock sliders out there that look.
There's a lot of faux sliders that are really steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you figure that out?
I mean, one way is just they're incredibly beefy and heavy and annoying. If it's too nice and sleek, it's probably not a real rock slider, right? Especially on a Tundra. But there's a company called CBI Off-Road Fab. They're kind of like
I think anybody watching the show knows who they are.
I think so at this point. If you're in the West, you know CBI. And if you're in the East, you know C4, right? They're like the two C's that are on the opposite sides of the country competing with each other.
Two C's on opposite C's.
Yeah. So CBI is pretty well known, and they're a local Idaho company too.
Okay.
So I actually just drove down to their shop and bought sliders and their roof rack, and had them install it there.
Well, I have the same roof rack, and I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it's really flexible, modular, so it works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used them, and I trusted them just based on reputation. I know a lot of other people that have used their stuff and beat it up.
Yep.
But it is a perfect example because there's an obsession right now of building these crazy trucks, and it's so funny because you actually have a crazy built truck, and I have a crazy built truck.
You do have have two crazy trucks.
Well, I have two, but I'm selling one of them, so it's not really like the one that I'm selling is paying for the new one, so it doesn't really count. But the trick is, I didn't go into debt to build my truck, or have the truck that I have, and so that works for me. I mean, this kind of goes to your question on where we're going. Why did we even get that truck?
Yeah,
and it works for my use case because I'm starting a company down in Baja, Mexico. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing a lot of trails down there, and we're going to be doing enough traveling down there, scouting, that I don't want to do scouting, driving 20 miles an hour, worried about my shocks and my truck jiggling itself to death, because that's what happens in Baja. It is the true, I don't know, I call it's like the last wild west in some ways, I feel like, and it just eats cars for breakfast, right?
Oh yeah, even if you're on washboard and you're in an overland truck, tighten your bolts the next day.
Right. But I'll give you a perfect example. Like on the last trip when we were in Baja, my buddy had a Tepui soft top tent on the back of his trailer. And by the time we got to the end of the trail, when he went to open it, as soon as he opened it, all you could just hear is all these bolts falling out of it. And it was all the screws that hold the little bars that swing out. All of them had jiggled completely out and just dumped on the ground. And it was like, well, that's Baja for you. We'll see.
I'm excited. I would, where's the dotted line? I'd love to sign up for this expedition because Baja sounds incredible.
Well, we have a lot of work to do since it's a startup. We've got to do we're in the middle of basically getting the amount of work that goes into the type of expedition that we're planning for people, there's a lot of competition in this space. And we're not actually trying to go after the level of competition that's there right now. We're trying to create something that's going to be pretty, like, truly unique. But in order to do that, it's like we're basically working on, you got to map out like the whole entire peninsula. You got to map out weather, like times of year, weather for everything. Yeah. And it's more predictable than you think in a weird way because of the nature of it being a peninsula that's very thin and coast on one side, and then you've got Sea of Cortez on the other side, right? Okay. So it's not 100% predictable, but there's certain times of year where like you don't want to be on the coastal side of it because it's just going to be fog, right? Yeah. So we don't want, somebody's dreaming of this amazing Baja expedition and we take them out to the coast and it's just foggy for a week straight. They're going to be pretty disappointed, right? Yeah. So in order to pull this off at the level that we want, we're not just going to do like, 7 trips or 10 trips or 12 trips a year to on the same run. So we're going to cater it to parts of the peninsula that are where you want to be when you want to be there. Okay. So there's a lot of scouting. And then, like I said, all the other stuff. Most of the companies that are doing this right now are operating in Mexico without permits. Oh, okay. So we're looking at actually doing it 100% legally and actually like paying our taxes and everything like you're supposed to. Because there's a lot of cowboy activity down there right now. For some reason, Americans think when they go to Baja, it's like, well, it's Mexico. We don't really have to follow the rules. But then they think that they have to follow the rules when they're here. Right. So it's very weird. So we have no intention of operating that way. So we're going to get it done right. We're going to have essentially the equivalent of like life flight available if anybody gets injured on our trips. We can get a helicopter to come in and get people out. Yeah. Got to have all the insurance. And then it's a lot of routes. It's more routes than you'd think. So we'll have coastal routes, but probably about 3 to 4 different coastal routes when we start. We'll have some Sierra routes because they have some mountains there that get snow and everything in pine forest that people
I was going to ask if they do, but they
do. So they have pine forest and they have they have great hot springs and stuff up there. Mm-hmm. So there'll be one that's going to be like the mountain route. It's like what a lot of people would think of like the Rubicon, right? Yeah. It's going to be up in the mountains, in the pine trees, camping and hitting up hot springs and stuff like that. And then there's going to be some stuff that's going to be on the more semi-tropical side that's along the Sea of Cortez, right? Okay. So you got to scout all that, figure it all out, permit it all, set up your base of operations, set up your shop. Mm-hmm. Then you have to have your mechanics. We have cooks, like we have to hire a chef actually too, because food's going to be catered and taken care of. Well, it's not catered, but we take care of the food for you. Right. And then all the stuff for pack in and pack out. So we're in the building phase. So we're not going to be going live. Our first trip is going to be January next year. So we have 12 months right now. Oh, wow. We're going to have a soft opening where we're going to run a couple trips with people that are not like fully paying customers at all, actually. In fact, probably all they're going to cover is their food. Right. And they're going to understand that they're on a soft opening trip. So we're going to have a couple of those sooner to test everything out. But other than that, we've got a year of work to do to get everything dialed.
So what do you think the ideal size is for a Tundra for tire?
So I think for me, starting out on my truck with even smaller tires than 35s, then running 35s, and now running 37s. Yeah. I learned to be a way better driver running small tires.
Now, 37s are a big commitment because what you're saying is that you didn't have to body mount chop with 35s, which is a huge, huge topic out there, is that you have to do a BMC when you run 35s on a Tundra, but you haven't. But when you do jump up to 37s, you no doubtedly have to do a BMC, plus you have to have the right alignment numbers.
You've got to do a lot of work to make, and you're not going to get away running 37s on a Tundra with some basic bolt-on kit. Right. And when I say basic, that's an insult to a lot of people because like basic bolt-on kit you could be talking $3,000 to $5,000 for a kit, and it's
Well,
still not going to get you there.
Yeah, but you could put blocks on your
Yeah.
rear end, and you could put blocks on your front end.
I just don't believe
and
in
you
blocks.
could still run
Yeah.
some tires, and you're gonna have to cut a lot. Or you could do like a bracket lift, right? But
If you're going to do all that,
if you're gonna
just run 35s and learn to be a better driver. It's great practice, is what I would say.
yeah, so you didn't have to do anything aftermarket to your front fender to fit 35s.
Nothing. So +1 offset. I am running. I always like to point this out because people are obsessed with arguing over whether 35s will fit without rubbing.
It's
It's this massive argument online where everyone wants to scream at each other. And it's like, guys, the reason nobody can agree on this is because there's more variables than 35-inch tire.
Mm-hmm.
So what brand of 35 you're running is kind of a big deal too, because a KO2, a BF Goodrich KO2 35 is not 35 inches, it's 34.5.
Oh, okay.
Whereas like a Nitto Grappler 35 is a true 35.
Okay.
I don't know if it rubs. It might rub for all I know.
Right.
I can tell you this, a KO2 35, which is really 34.5 inches on a +1 offset with a 2.5-inch lift does not rub, period, at full stuff and full droop
which
and
you've
full
done.
turn on both ways, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't rub. It has no issues. It clears it all. But that you realize how many variables that is? That the lift that I have, it's not just the lift kit. Well, fine. Somebody else can run the exact same lift kit, but what did they set their preload at? Is their preload the same as mine? Is mine cranked up higher? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So this is why this is a huge argument, and I wish people would stop arguing it over one or two variables and acknowledge variable 1 is the lift kit, variable 2 is the preload you're running on that lift kit, variable 3 is your wheel offset, variable 4 is the actual tire, not the tire size, the actual brand tire and tire size, because they actually all measure different and they aren't exactly 35 inches.
Exactly.
Once you get all that dialed, somebody could give you a setup and say, I guarantee you this exact setup will work, but you'd have to match all those variables.
What occupies your other time in life? We know you as a YouTube star. We know you as a
Not
business.
quite.
You're a business genius, a YouTube star. You're basically Instagram famous.
Do we need to talk about my real job that actually pays the bills, or just hanging out with my family on my farm?
No, we know that we all have real jobs, and this is not what we do.
Yeah, so I have my real boring job that is a tech job. Well, I say boring, and that's not even fair, because starting a tech company and running it and stuff can actually be very exciting, but it's kind of like if your the core of who you are as a human being wants to go live an adventure and appreciates the outdoors, and his favorite adventure space is being outdoors.
Right.
Starting up a company and running it is not that.
Yeah.
It's just a different type of adventure.
Well,
So yeah, that's one thing that I do. But beyond that, I live on a farm in Idaho. It's a hobby farm. I don't really do much farming on it.
Yeah.
But I have 2 kids and a wife, and our favorite 2 activities outside of overlanding and camping are skiing, and I snowboard, and the rest of my family skis. My daughter is 9.
Yeah.
Every time we get off a lift and I have to buckle up my boot to like put my snowboard on, she always just looks at me and rolls her eyes and goes, Dad, that's why I would never be a snowboarder. I go, like, look, kid, when I was your age, this was really cool. It's only recently that skiing has made this massive resurgence, and now is definitely the main thing.
Times. Snowboarding's not cool anymore.
No, it's not.
By the way, your family, I've met them, and they are bona fide. I love the dynamic. I mean, I'm a dad too, and sometimes I'll yell at my kids to eat dinner. And, talking to you, I don't want people to get the impression that you're above being a normal human being.
I'm a very real dad at all times.
You really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were hanging out here today, and it was like, hi, you're going to edit? That's good. You should edit because I need to wash the dishes, empty the cat litter,
and
cook these kids some food. that's not going to impress anyone.
Right. But it's like the everyday life that people gloss over, and they think that you're this YouTube star and you don't do this normal everyday stuff, but this is who you are as a real person. And it's I think it's what needs to be shown and what people need to see.
The local ski park that we have in Idaho,
Right.
the day that it closes, we always try to go skiing the last day, and then we try to start our rafting season the next day, which means there's like still snow on the banks of the river. So you're wearing like a dry suit and freezing, but we go try to hit the river and start rafting. So rafting is our long season where we get rafting for like, I don't know, 7 to 8 months of the year. And then skiing season's the short season. Okay. And then during rafting season, I mean, I'm trying to more and more incorporate rafting into overlanding, where we can load up all the rafting gear, we can drive someplace, we could raft, and then we can load all that stuff back up and then drive up in the mountains and camp. Yeah. Maybe get a couple rafting runs in and do some camping. So we are big rafters. I haven't really figured, I mean, we'll cover it in a video at some point, but it's funny, like the audience, you make a video about how passionate you are about rafting. Yeah. Stick it on a channel that's about overlanding, and everybody like clicks into it for 1 second because they want to see you flip and freeze to death. And then they're like, boring, goodbye. So I don't know. It's our other thing that we do that we love.
That's good.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Overlanding, I don't believe overlanding has to be expensive.
Right.
And I'm actually going to do a video series on this. Okay. Because here's laying down the gauntlet. I don't know how we're going to pull this off. We're probably going to ruin something. But I just want to try it just to prove a point. But it's, the problem with like social media and things like YouTube nowadays. Yeah. You can't just prove a point by just doing something a normal way. Like you do something a normal way and nobody will watch your video. Everybody will just be like, yeah, whatever. Nobody cares. Right. So I'm like, okay. So I want to do a budget overland build on my wife's Subaru crossover. And when I say a budget overland build, it's going to have to be under $2,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of people will listen to this, and I get it. Like I grew up without a lot. You and me both grew up without having money. Yeah. Like, exactly. My number one goal in life, not that long ago, was just to not be poor, right? Right. So I grew up with no money. So even saying, this is why I always have to check everything that I say. Because even when I'm sitting here saying like, I want to do a video on a budget overland build, it's $2,000 on a Subaru. Like old myself would listen to that and frankly just be insulted and annoyed. It's like, what, you got $2,000 to just go waste on a Subaru build? And it's just like, yeah, I totally understand all of that actually. But my point is, I want to take a crossover. It is not a car with a lot of clearance. It does have all-wheel drive. It's a Subaru. They're very good cars, right? Right. But the deal is, to prove that point on a platform like YouTube, you can't just like go overland it and go camping. Everybody's like, well, anybody could do that. And it's like, yes, anybody could. That means the car that you have right now in your garage, whatever it is, that means you too can go overlanding. I don't care if it's a Honda Civic. You can go overlanding and camping in the wilderness if you want to. Bad enough, right?
It's the one, right? Right. It's if you want that in your life.
Right. So it's not about building trucks and four-wheel drive vehicles. It's about getting out into a peaceful place and finding some adventure and some peace. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Like that's overlanding, right? So I want to, like, to the most extreme point possible to try to prove the point, I want to do like a $2,000 budget build on her car. And then I want to go run the whole entire Idaho backcountry discovery route with my truck, my expensive overland truck, and her truck at the same time. Yeah. And then I want to take her truck to Moab. Her Subaru to Moab.
Because you keep saying truck and it's
I want to take my truck and her Subaru to Moab, and I want to go run like fins and things for sure. We'll go run fins and things for sure.
Oh, low CG, you got this.
on the Subaru, but I also kind of want to go run Hell's Revenge on it. And the thing is, I've run it before on my Tundra, right? On my Tundra at 35s. So I know that, I mean, there are some bypasses and stuff, right? But there's unavoidable like shelves on that one that I know the Subaru can't clear.
Yeah.
So the budget build on the Subaru is basically going to be sliders, Under Armour, and cutting the bumpers. I'm not even going to put technically aftermarket bumpers. I'm going to cut the bumpers for better clearance, and then probably do a tube, we're just going to weld a tube bumper for the front and the rear.
Okay.
Stick it on it, and we're just going to armor that thing up on the bottom. Because the thing is that there's rock shelves that it can't get down quite right but if with the right armor, I think we'll just slide it exactly like I'm talking about with my Tundra.
Right.
So I think that's kind of my goal this next year is to finish off a budget build on the Subaru and go run two of the most famous, and this isn't overlanding. People that are overlanding are mostly driving on Forest Service roads, fire roads, dirt roads. Okay, so maybe they got some ruts in them, but just good wheel placement, you can get through all of that in a Subaru, right?
Yeah,
exactly. We're not talking that. Like Hell's Revenge is going to be that's low to mid-level, rock crawling stuff in most people's book, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to go run all of that because my channel, I want it to be about making overlanding more accessible. I want more people to stop building trucks for 2 years and just go get outside. Go take your family outside. Yeah. Don't watch Netflix. Get outside and go have an adventure, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of my big goals.
Well, that's a big thing is that, and I talk about this on my channel in one of my very earliest videos that I'm not extremely proud of. They didn't seem to progress the genuine self of who I am. But I talk about lifts, and
that's just because it's terrifying to talk to a camera, by the way.
It's horrible. This is way easier right here.
Yeah,
right?
It's so much easier. A podcast, instead of staring at some giant camera lens that looks like an eyeball.
Yeah. I know there's cameras around here, but it's kind of moot to the point of
I'm not
us
staring
just
into
having
a camera.
A conversation. But when I first started, it's and I have four-wheel drive. I have four-wheeling experience, and it's you really have to test what you have. And that's what we did with the Tundra. We took it up and we tested how far we could take it before we actually needed to do anything to it. And before we did anything to it, we kind of exhausted that whole list of what it could do. And then we built a list on what we needed it to do.
Yep.
And when we realized we needed it to do, then we found the perfect products for what we needed. And once we found those products, we were able to move forward with the concept of building something other than the stock version. And once we did that, then we were able to go the places that we felt were important to us as a family. But coming back to the big idea of you need to build a truck to do something other than what it can already do from the factory is preposterous, because we would camp and we would four-wheel and we'd go snow camping and we would do a lot of stuff. And then once we finally bought into the system, we could do more.
Yeah.
Guaranteed we could do a lot more, but we weren't just throwing money at nothing because, there's not a lot of money to spend, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the point of what you're talking about.
Well, most people out there aren't going to buy a truck, do a crazy expensive build, and then do 40,000 miles of overlanding in 1 year. You know what I mean? But everybody that I know that wants to get into overlanding is acting like they're that person.
Right.
And it's kind of wait, where are you actually going to go?
Yeah.
And I live in Idaho, and so a lot of the people here are talking about there's a lot of wonderfully remote places in Idaho. You can drive on dirt from the top of the state to the bottom of the state, basically. You might have to drive across a paved road, but you can basically drive, I think it's 1,163 miles, I think is the BDR route from Canada to the bottom of Idaho. Yeah. It's basically all dirt.
Somebody fact check him.
Yeah,
But
it's
look at me, fact checked him.
yeah,
on
fact
that
check
one.
me. But the Idaho BDR is very long. It's over 1,000 miles. And it's almost all dirt and it's almost all backcountry. And people like I have people that are building trucks, and it's kind of like I'm like, well, what kind of stuff are you guys gonna want to run? Do you want to run the BDR someday? And it's like, well, no, I don't have enough time to like do that. But like, I want to go up and run like some of that stuff. And you're kind of like, guys, like, we run some of that stuff every other weekend in the summer, and you can run it in a Subaru. Like, don't stop putting off the adventure. Just like go for it. I sound like a broken record at this point, but even like I build my truck for the most extreme stuff that I do, but I only do
Right.
the most extreme stuff that I do like less than 10% of the time. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course.
I mean, with starting a company down in Baja, I think it's going to be a little bit more because we're probably going to be down there a decent amount doing footage and like finding some routes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even with that, I mean, like, that's not your typical overlander experience. It's like that's only happening because of the company implications. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, again, nobody that builds like a super extravagant vehicle, I don't think you should ever feel guilty or anything if you're doing it because you have the resources to do it. That's great. It's just the problem is people like me that have the resources to build the extravagant vehicle, now all of a sudden everybody thinks that they need that to go do basic overlanding. And you're like, no, not the case. Not the case at all.
Right. Not at all. And just to let everybody know out there, we didn't build our truck to be extravagant overlanders. We actually use it because we need to be in a parking space at the hospital. And if we spent 2 nights a month in our vehicle, it pays for the night that the 2 nights that we would stay in a hospital. So realistically, instead of living in a hospital or living in a hotel room 2 nights a month, of which our average is 2 nights a month in a hotel room, with all the hospital visits that we have to do, it made more monetary sense to actually buy a truck that could handle what we do and handle our adventures. And then it allows us to take care of the hotel room for 2 nights a month. And it allows us to still make the hospital visits and still be mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was no like, I want to be the coolest guy. I want to have the only thing. I want to be shiny and new. It was more like we need a way to be able to do things differently than how we do them, but still do them efficiently.
Yeah. I think the one other concept of overlanding that I think is really funny, because everybody has this idea of like sleeping on the edge of the Grand Canyon every single day and waking up.
Right.
Like half the times that we're like going, traveling across like 5 states,
Yeah.
we're literally sleeping in one of our friends' driveways. Like they have too small of a house to like have a place for us to stay. But when you're passing through an area and you're like, okay, we already drove 12 hours today and we need to sleep, and you're in the middle of a city, it's like, who do we know in this city? Can we park in your driveway and can we sleep there?
Right.
No campfire, nothing. You're just pulling in. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're popping your rooftop tent. You're going to bed. You hang out with them a little bit in the morning, have breakfast, say thank you, and then you move on. And by the way, a lot of times that's overlanding. That's the other thing that's like
very real right there.
Yeah. When you're covering thousands of miles, you're not doing all of that in some beautiful picturesque Grand Canyon spot. You're sleeping in cities. You're sleeping any place that you can find where you won't
Shout
get
out to
arrested.
everybody who stayed at a KOA.
Yeah, KOA.
I mean, so for us, we also need water sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best resource for water is an actual campground, because they usually have potable water. So if they don't, we'll bypass that campground. But if they have potable water, we'll hook up our water hose, we'll hook up our filter, we'll fill up our tanks, and then we'll all shower that night. And that feels really nice.
Yeah.
So overlanding for us isn't always being off the grid and outdoors and this magnificent thing that it so often gets portrayed as.
Yeah.
But we'll be in your driveway and we'll be hooked up to power, and then we'll be like, hey, can we fill it with water?
Yeah.
You'd be like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So you're right on that one.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the problem with the overlanding, the whole word classification for whatever this is still so new that it's kind of like still very up in the air what it actually is.
Yeah.
Because overlanding is not off-roading, and overlanding is not rock crawling.
It's not.
And it's not even necessarily 4x4 because, like I said, like you can do it in a two-wheel drive car. It just depends on your choice of terrain, whether you need more than a two-wheel drive car to overland. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Me
Absolutely.
personally, I definitely choose terrain where a two-wheel drive car is probably not going to get me there. But that's not everybody's case. Like some of the most like romanticized things in overlanding, like let's say you drive the whole entire Pacific Coast Highway from the border of Mexico all the way to Alaska. You're like, whoa, that sounds so cool. And you're like, yeah, it's like...
Which we've seen several people do on film, and it's not a big deal. Go ahead.
But it's also like 98% pavement, and then your biggest battle sometimes is you get too tired, you didn't make it as many miles as you thought you were going to, and you're trying to figure out where to sleep in the middle of a city, right? In your rooftop tent where you won't get ticketed and or arrested, right?
Exactly.
And you're like, that's overlanding. And it's like, no, that's not. Like, overland can't be anything that doesn't have a campfire and like rock crawling. And you're like, no, I mean, yeah, sure. Overlanding is unfortunately still very much what anybody wants it to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's no defined.
It's not defined.
No defined term yet for this.
Right.
There's overlanding, which we all kind of know as like this encompassing idea, and then there's expedition vehicle.
Yeah.
So this expedition vehicle is a world-class, world-traveling vehicle.
Right.
And an overlander is more of a single continent traveling vehicle.
Yeah. The problem is none of it's defined, right?
It's not.
So in your mind, it might be that, and in somebody else's mind, it might be something different. In a lot of people's mind, overlanding vehicle and expedition vehicle is the same thing. But here's the problem.
But it's not.
Yeah, it can't be. It doesn't matter what people think it is. Right. That just simply can't be. Because if you want an expedition vehicle, for example, that you're going to drive to the bottom of South America,
right?
There are huge rules of engagement for that vehicle. There's rules of engagement on tire size. You're not running 35s. You're not running 37s. You're not running anything crazy like that. You're running the most commonly bought tire sizes that exist on planet Earth.
Right.
Because if you have more than one blowout, and by the way, that's a really long trip.
Yeah.
You have to be able to source stuff in a foreign country, right?
Exactly.
So expedition vehicles it's a whole entire build all its own based on where you're doing that expedition. The rules of engagement are set by the countries you're going to travel in.
Right.
And it's based on the availability of resources. Mm-hmm. It's literally not based on how hard the terrain could be, because let's say the availability of resources dictates to you that like, well, I can't risk that. We better find another route that's not as risky, right?
Yeah.
That's how it will literally go sometimes. And that's like expedition vehicles and going on expeditions, right? Mm-hmm. Right. When you're overlanding, you have the luxury of much more slack. Yeah. You can run a car that has 37s and go do Moab or go do the Rubicon.
Well, I think the thing that we're talking about now is actually doing a budget vehicle and getting out within your country that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because then you understand, your budget,
mm-hmm.
The terrain, because let's face it, you're going to do a build for the terrain that you actually intend to go on.
Right.
Which is kind of a known thing. And if it's not a known thing, you have Google. It's not that hard.
No, not at all. You're right.
Yeah. So then you can plan for that. I mean, I'm telling you right now, 90% of overlanders could get by with a Subaru Outback. It's not a popular opinion. I know that.
Well, it is gaining popularity because the more you look at Instagram and the less I'm interested in spending a bunch of money on an overland vehicle, the more they show me Subarus.
Yeah. So I got into overlanding because of this. Really, I blame my brother first, and then that transpired into working in global health for almost 10 years. And then global health got me into driving to really remote, crazy locations in both Africa and Haiti. Mm-hmm. And that got me into this whole idea of like man plus vehicle versus earth. I know that sounds dumb, but like that's the real challenge of overlanding sometimes. Where do you want to go? How challenging is it to get there? What is the terrain? And it's you, it's your vehicle, and can you get there and can you get back, right? And that's what I love about overlanding. And I learned that. I loved it, doing global health work.
We appreciate the time that you gave us today, and we hope to see you on the trail.
I'll be out there.